Hello, Dr. Hamid is here. Today we are going to talk about autonomic nervous system. In our body, nervous system and endocrine system coordinate in controlling and integration and regulation of bodily function. The difference between nervous system and endocrine system is that most of the time nervous system send electrical signals to target tissue, but endocrine system sends chemical signals to the target tissue. We are not going to talk about nervous system and endocrine system and what is the difference between nervous system and endocrine system today. Today we are going to talk about a part of the nervous system which is autonomic nervous system. As we all know, we can divide nervous system into two main divisions. Nervous system is composed of two main divisions. The first division is central nervous system, which is the center of the nervous system. Central nervous system. And all we know that the center of the nervous system is brain and spinal cord. The second division of the nervous system is peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system. These are the fibers which are located in the periphery. Some of these fibers receive signals from the periphery and transfer these signals to the central nervous system. Then in the central nervous system, we analyze these signals and then we respond to the signals. But the type of signals which we receive from the periphery and we transfer it by these type of fiber that I'm talking about them, these are the sensory fibers. And the type of sensory signals and the type of fibers which transfer sensory signals from the periphery to the center of the nervous system, those are the afferent fibers. So one of the type of fiber which is located in the periphery, those are afferent fibers or afferent nerve, we can say also. What is the function of afferent nerves? Afferent nerves receive signals from the periphery and transfer these signals to the central nervous system. And most of these signals, we can say all of these signals are sensory signals. The second type of fibers are the fibers. I told you that we receive sensory signals, we transfer it to the central nervous system. In the central nervous system, we analyze these type of signals. Then we have to respond to these signals. And again, we have to transfer these signals when we respond to them in the central nervous system. We have to transfer it from the central nervous system to periphery or peripheral organ. The type of fibers or the type of nerves which transfer these responses from central nervous system to peripheral organs are efferent fibers. So the difference between efferent fibers and afferent fibers is that afferent fibers transfer sensory signals, but efferent fibers transfer motor signals. In the motor fibers, or we can say that in the efferent fibers, we can subdivide these fibers into two. Type of fibers which transfer motor signals to the organs which act voluntarily. These are somatic fibers. So we can subdivide it into somatic fibers. For example, somatic fibers transfer motor signals to the skeletal muscles, and all we know that skeletal muscles act voluntarily. They are not autonomic. But some of these fibers transfer the signals to the organs which act voluntarily. For example, and we call them autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system. For example, we are having some type of fibers in the autonomic nervous system which send motor signals or transfer motor signals to the heart, to the vessels, to digestive system, to liver. We will talk about them today. So autonomic nervous system. In the autonomic nervous system, we are having three different type of fiber. The first is sympathetic system or sympathetic fiber, sympathetic nervous system. We are having parasympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, and also we are having a system in the digestive system, and that is enteric nervous system. Enteric nervous system. So the type of fibers which transfer motor signals to the involuntary organs are sympathetic fibers, parasympathetic fibers, and enteric fibers. Now today we are going to talk about only autonomic nervous system. Only we are going to talk about sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, and enteric nervous system, which are in the efferent fibers, and efferent fibers are a part of peripheral nervous system. Okay. When we want to talk about the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, and the enteric nervous system, the first thing that we should know is about their origin, from where they originate. First, we'll talk about the origin of the parasympathetic nervous system. Another name for parasympathetic nervous system on the basis of its origin, parasympathetic nervous system. Another name on the basis of its origin is craniosacral. Craniosacral nervous system. Nervous system. Why we are saying that parasympathetic nervous system is a craniosacral nervous system? Because one part of the parasympathetic nervous system, some of these fibers which are in the parasympathetic nervous system, they originate from the cranial part, especially from the nucleus of the 3rd, 7th, 9th, and 10th cranial nerve. So the first part of these parasympathetic nervous system, or we can say the origin for some of the fibers in the parasympathetic nervous system, is in the cranial, especially from the 3rd, 7th, 9th, and 10th cranial nerve. The nucleus of the 3rd, 7th, 9th, and 10th cranial nerve. Some of the fibers in the parasympathetic nervous system, they originate from the sacral segment of the spinal cord, especially from the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th segment of the sacral portion. So some of the fibers, they originate from the 2nd, S2, S3, and S4 portion of the spinal cord. So the origin for the fibers of the parasympathetic nervous system are, some of the fibers originate from the cranial part, especially from the nucleus of the 3rd, 7th, 9th, and 10th cranial nerve. And some of the fibers originate from the sacral segments of the spinal cord, 2nd segment, 3rd segment, and 4th segment. This was about the origin of the parasympathetic nervous system. Now we should know about the origin of the sympathetic fibers. Most of the time, these sympathetic nervous system, another name for sympathetic nervous system on the basis of the origin of the fibers is thoracolumbar. Thoracolumbar. Sympathetic nervous system. Another name is thoracolumbar. Why we are saying thoracolumbar? Because The origin for its fibers are from the thoracic portion and lumbar portion of the spinal cord. Especially they originate from T1 to T12 of the thoracic portion, and also they are originating from lumbar part, especially from L1 and L2. It means this first segments of the lumbar portion and second segments of the lumbar portion. So from where they are originating? From T1 to T12, and also from L1 and L2. This was about the origin of the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. The second things which we should know about sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system is about the type of fibers we are having in these two systems. In the parasympathetic nervous system, we are having preganglionic fibers as well as postganglionic fibers. All we know that what is ganglion? Ganglions are a collection of the cell body of the neuron in the periphery. The fibers which are before these ganglions, these are the preganglionic fibers, and the type of fibers which are in the after of these ganglion, those are postganglionic fibers. So in the parasympathetic nervous system, we are having preganglionic fibers as well as postganglionic fibers. And the third things that we should know about the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system is about the location of these ganglion. We will talk about them. So, as I said, the fibers which are before these ganglions, these are the preganglionic fibers, and the fibers which are after these ganglion, those are postganglionic fibers. Postganglionic fibers. And I have written this is ganglion, which is a collection of the cells body of the neuron in the periphery. Now, we should know about the characteristic of these fibers also. Preganglionic fibers in the parasympathetic nervous system are longer than postganglionic fibers. And this is on the basis of the location of the ganglion. Most of the time, the location of these ganglion are close to the organ which these fibers innervate, or it is directly on the organ. So, if we know about the location of the ganglion, now we know about the origin. This was about the origin. The second thing that we should know is about the location of ganglion. Location of ganglion in the parasympathetic nervous system is close to organ or on the organ. Now, if the ganglions are close to organ or on the organ, so what will be the characteristic of this preganglionic fiber? The length of these preganglionic fiber always are longer than these postganglionic fibers. So the next things that we should know, it's about the fiber, characteristic of the fibers, how the characteristic for these fibers, preganglionic fibers are longer than postganglionic fibers. Now, we know about the origin of the parasympathetic nervous system. We know about the location of the ganglionic in the parasympathetic nervous system. Also, we know about the length of the preganglionic fiber and the length of postganglionic fiber. One more character is there about these fiber. I will talk about them after talking about these, also about sympathetic nervous system. We should know about the location of the ganglion in the sympathetic nervous system also. The ganglion in the sympathetic nervous system are close to the spinal cord. So, if the ganglion are close to a spinal cord, What will be the length of the parasympathetic preganglionic fiber and postganglionic fiber? The length of preganglionic fiber are always shorter than the postganglionic fibers. So about location of the ganglion, the location of the ganglion close to spinal cord, and about the length of these fiber, preganglionic are shorter than postganglionic. Okay, this was about origin. This was about the location of the ganglion, as well as about the length of the preganglionic and postganglionic fiber in the sympathetic nervous system, as well as in the parasympathetic nervous system. Another characteristic of these preganglionic fiber and postganglionic fiber in the sympathetic nervous system and in the parasympathetic nervous system is that in the parasympathetic nervous system, these preganglionic fibers originate from the cranial part and also from the sacral portion of the spinal cord. They synapse in the ganglion with the second neuron. But the characteristics of these fiber are that there is one-to-one connection. It means that one preganglionic fiber synapses with one postganglionic fibers only. This is the characteristics of parasympathetic fibers. So one-to-one connection is in the second characteristic is one-to-one connection is in the parasympathetic nervous system. But in the sympathetic nervous system, one preganglionic fiber, it can synapse with more than one postganglionic fibers. One preganglionic can synapse with more than one postganglionic fiber. So another characteristic for sympathetic fiber are one preganglionic can synapse with many postganglionic fiber. When one ganglionic can synapse with many postganglionic fiber, so the type of response which we can see after stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system are so extensive. But the type of response when we stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, because only one preganglionic fiber, it can synapse or it can connect to one postganglionic fiber, the type of response when we stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system we can see is discrete type of response. This is the another difference between the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, this was about the origin, this was about the location of the ganglion, this was about the characteristics of the fibers in the sympathetic nervous system as well as in the parasympathetic nervous system. The next things which we want to study about the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system is that most of the organ we have in our body, they have dual innervation. It means that we are having sympathetic fibers for those organs as well as we are having the parasympathetic fibers for those organs. And these parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system in the innervation of the organs are in the balance. It means that if we stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, at the same time we are inhibiting the parasympathetic nervous system. Or if we stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, at the same time we are inhibiting the sympathetic nervous system. And the type of effect or the type of response after innervation are opposite to each other. And now we are going to talk about the effect of sympathetic nervous system on the organ, as well as we will study about the effect of parasympathetic nervous system on the organ. First, we will start by the effect of parasympathetic nervous system on the organ. When we stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, we should know about that another name for parasympathetic nervous system is rest and digest. system, because this system is responsible for digestion, as well as it's responsible when we are resting. It controls our bodily function. Okay, now imagine when we are resting or when we are digesting the food, what is the effect of this system on our eye, or what is the effect of this system on our salivary gland? We want to digest the food, so what will be the effect on salivary gland? We should secrete more saliva. So stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system will increase the salivation. It will increase salivation. What will be the effect on the eye? It will cause miosis. What will the effect on the heart? We are having parasympathetic receptors, which we will talk about it in next lecture. We are having those receptors on the heart also. So imagine when we are digesting the food or when we are resting, what is the effect of this parasympathetic nervous system on the heart? Will it stimulate the heart? Will it increase the heart rate, or will it inhibit the heart, or it will decrease the heart rate? Absolutely, it will decrease the heart rate, it will decrease the force of contraction. So by stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system, what is the effect on the heart? It will decrease the heart rate, as well as it will decrease the cardiac output, as well as it will decrease the force of contraction. Okay, next, when we are sleeping or when we are digesting the food, what is the effect of parasympathetic nervous system on the airways as well as on the lungs? Okay, imagine that when we are resting, when we are digesting the food, when we are relaxing, the respiratory rate is decreased. It is like that. But the depth of the respiration has increased. This is the effect of parasympathetic nervous system on the respiratory system. The rate of respiration decreases, but depth of respiration, depth increases. And also it will cause, on the airways, it will cause bronchoconstriction. Bronchoconstriction. This was effect of parasympathetic nervous system on the respiratory system. Now, what will be the effect of parasympathetic nervous system on the digestive system? See, we want to digest the food, so we have to increase the activity of the digestive system. It means that we have to increase the movement. Also, we have to increase the secretion. We have to increase the secretion of the HCl. We have to increase the secretion of the these juice, digestive juice also. So on the digestive system, it increases the secretion as well as it increases the movement. Movement increases as well as it increases the secretion. What will be the effect on the liver? For example, what will be the effect on the gallbladder? We want to digest the food. Imagine that that food is a type of lipid food, fat food. So we have to increase secretion of the bile into the small intestine to emulsify the lipids or fat. So it increases contraction of gallbladder, as well as it increase the secretion of bile. This is the effect of stimulating parasympathetic nervous system. Next is on the bladder. The same effect will be on the bladder also, on the urinary system also. It will increase the movement. It will increase the contraction of the smooth muscles in the urinary system also, as well as it will increase excretion of the urine in the urinary system. So it will contract the smooth muscle. It will increase contraction of smooth muscle, as well as the next effect will be increase excretion of urine. These are the effects when we stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. But when we stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, another name for sympathetic nervous system is this fight and flight system. It means that when we are fighting, when we are flighting, our sympathetic nervous system has activated. But why in fight and flighting we are activating the sympathetic nervous system, and what is the effect of activating this system? See, when I'm fighting, I need more energy in my muscles to fight with others. Or when I am flighting, I need more energy, more oxygen, more blood circulation to my muscles, especially to a skeletal muscle as well as to the cardiac muscles. So, what will be the effect when I stimulate the sympathetic nervous system? See, when I'm fighting, when I'm flighting, I have to see what is around, what's happening around me. So one of the effects of stimulating the sympathetic nervous system on the eye is mydriasis. It dilates the pupil. Mydriasis. It dilates the pupil. So when I'm in fighting or when I'm in flighting, do I need saliva for digestion? I'm not in the digestion phase. I'm in the flighting or I'm in the fighting. So I don't need saliva. So it will decrease salivation. It decrease secretion of saliva. Secretion of saliva decreases. What will be the effect on the heart? I told you that we need more blood circulation to the skeletal muscle for fighting, because skeletal muscles need oxygen, and for oxygen, for transferring oxygen, we need blood circulation. We have to increase the blood circulation to the muscles to increase delivering of oxygen to these muscles, to increase formation of ATP. Now, what will be the effect of activating sympathetic nervous system to the heart? It will stimulate the heart, it will increase the heart rate, it will increase the force of contraction, it will increase the cardiac output. Further, we can increase oxygen supplies to the skeletal muscle, as well as we can increase the formation of ATP. So, on the heart, the effect is increasing in heart rate, increasing in cardiac output, as well as increasing in the force of contraction. Force of contraction. Okay, what about in the vessels? I told you we need more blood circulation, so the vessels will dilate. What is the effect? Vasodilatation. Vasodilatation. It means that it relaxes the smooth muscles in the vessels. By relaxing the smooth muscles, it causes vasodilatation. What is the effect on the digestive system? When we are fighting and flighting, I told you the effect of sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system are opposite to each other. When we are activating the parasympathetic nervous system, we increase the secretion as well as movement in the digestive system. But when we are activating the sympathetic nervous system, the movement as well as secretion will decreases. So movement and secretion will decreases. Movement and secretion decreases. Okay, in the liver, I know, and all we know that secretion of bile will decreases, but one more function these liver have is that we store glucose as glycogen in the liver. When we are fighting and flighting, we need more energy. And how we can get that energy? By breakdown of glucose. So conversion of glycogen to glucose will increases in the liver. This is the effect when we stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. When we are fighting and flighting, when I was fighting and flighting, I have never told anyone that stop fighting here, let me go to the washroom, then I'll come back, again we'll start fighting. So what will be the effect? The excretion of urine will decreases, the contraction of the smooth muscles in the urine also will decreases. This is the effect when we stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. So excretion of urine, excretion decreases, contraction of smooth muscles will decrease also. What is the effect on respiratory system? See, when we are fighting and flighting, I told you that we need oxygen, and when we need more oxygen, so what is the effect? The effect will be bronchodilation. So here the effect is bronchodilation. But what about on the lung? The respiratory rate will increases, but the depth of the respiration will decreases. Respiratory rate increases, the depth of respiration will decreases. Okay, the next effect of activation or stimulating of the sympathetic nervous system is on the adrenal gland. In the adrenal gland, all we know that we have two parts. One is the medulla, another is the cortex. In the medulla, we make adrenaline and limited amount of noradrenaline, and in the cortex we make adrenal hormone, like for example this cortisol, aldosterone, as well as sex hormone. When we stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, this sympathetic nervous system sends some signals to the adrenal gland, especially to the medulla part, and it increases synthesis as well as releasing of adrenaline and noradrenaline. Then this adrenaline and noradrenaline binds to the sympathetic receptors, and by binding to the sympathetic receptor, it can increase activation of the sympathetic nervous system. When it sends some signals to the cortex of the medulla, it can increase synthesis as well as it can increase the releasing of the cortisol, aldosterone, as well as sex hormone. This was the effect and the difference between the parasympathetic nervous system activation and sympathetic nervous system activation. Okay, I told you that in autonomic nervous system, we are having sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, and enteric nervous system. We talked about these two systems, but enteric nervous system are a collection of the fibers which innervate the digestive system. All we know that what is the effect of activation of sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system on the digestive system. So this enteric nervous system modulated by sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, and this is responsible for movement in the digestive system, secretion of endocrine and exocrine gland in the digestive system. Okay, now I want to tell you some characteristics of the autonomic nervous system. The first characteristic was dual innervation of the organ. I told you that we are having sympathetic innervation and parasympathetic innervation in the organ, except in some organs, for example, in the adrenal gland, for example, in the sweat gland, we are only, or in the pilomotor muscles, we are having only a sympathetic nervous system innervation. This was about characteristics of these autonomic nervous system. Okay, one more thing that I'm going to talk about it. I told you that in efferent fibers, one more characteristic is there also. In efferent fibers, we are only having motor signals. And where do we get, and these motor signals are a response to sensory signals. Where we can get these sensory signals? From these afferent fibers. These different organs, they transfer different signals to the afferent fibers, then afferent fibers transfer these signals to the central nervous system. Central nervous system analyze these signals and then respond to these signals and then sends some motor signals to same organs. See, you can see between the autonomic nervous system and between the central nervous system there is coordination, and they are in coordinating with each other to control the function of the organs. This was about another characteristic of the autonomic nervous system, which I wanted to tell you, that autonomic nervous system is in coordination with central nervous system to control the function of organs. Okay, in afferent fibers, in addition to autonomic nervous system or autonomic nerve fibers, we are having somatic fibers also. The only difference between the somatic fibers and autonomic nervous system or autonomic fibers is that in somatic fibers, we are sending motor signals to the skeletal muscles, which are voluntary muscles. And these signals are sent by one fibers only. We are not having different ganglions. We are not having preganglion and postganglion fibers in the somatic fiber. We are having only one fiber which is myelinated, and these two characteristics, I mean one fiber with myelinated fiber, it increased the speed of transferring of these signals. This was another difference between somatic fiber and autonomic nervous system. Okay, in next lecture we will talk about the different chemicals which we release in the synapses of the parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system, as well as we will talk about the sympathetic nervous system receptor and parasympathetic nervous system receptor.